My name is Craig Scheller with Scheller Outdoor Living, and I am a hardscaper.
Okay, Craig, let's get started here to get to know a little bit more about yourself, how you got into the industry, and what brought you to this point where you started your own business.
Well, first, Mike, I'd like to say thank you for doing this because as somebody that's been in the industry a long time, there was a point in my career where I was wondering if the hardscape industry would ever take off as more than just like a landscape, shovel and wheelbarrow, half ton pickup truck kind of thing. And hearing all the interviews and stories that you do is great. So I appreciate you taking the time to have people on and hear their stories and help others in the industry to grow. I started, if I really go back to the beginning of what got me interested into working outside and working with landscape and turf and all that, it's, cutting my grandma's grass when I was 12 years old, and that just, it kind of, she'd have us there all day pulling weeds and all that stuff. And I had the opportunity to work for an excavator when I was about 16 or 17. That's when I started plowing snow. I was a ditch guy. He would run the machine and say, go find the utilities, so I learned how to run a shovel at a very young age. Also learned how to run equipment. And that was a good experience for me. And then my brother and I would kind of mow like people's yards in the neighborhood or do a few here and there. And when I was in college, I went to community college to do grounds and turf management. So I have an associate's degree in that at a local community college here in Kansas City. And I was able to buy a mower and some accounts from a guy that was getting out of mowing. So kind of like everybody else, I got into mowing. This was in 1997 or 8, I think. This is a while ago. And so I kind of started my first business, which was Craig's Lawn Care. And then, man, I was young and started getting money. I was thought I had it going on. I was terrible at managing it. It lasted about 4 years. In that time, I was introduced to pavers and retaining walls, very early Gen 1 stuff. We were doing Plaza and, the split face block with the bevel, all that stuff. So it was pretty early stuff, but I did learn some stuff with that. But after that, I in the early 2000s, I went to work for another company and did some retaining walls and projects with them. It was a friend of mine I met in college. And so I spent a little bit of time there. I learned very quickly that I was more of an entrepreneur than an employee. So I struggled with, kind of working for people, which probably ended up hurting me in the future, but we can discuss that more here in a few minutes. But so I also did framing, construction. We did commercial and residential framing. I've had a lot of different experiences that kind of led me to where I am now. And in 2008, I was laid off of a job working at a lumber company. My wife and I were celebrating our 1 year anniversary that same week. We had just bought a house. I was making a salary. She had a job. And all of a sudden, I had no job. And so I was like, well, I could try to mow some yards and do some stuff, and it was April. So it was good time to get into that. And it just took off. And it was, 2008 was a year of recession when I started the business. And I didn't make a ton of money, but we paid our bills, and I was able to get some accounts going. And that was the start of Scheller Lawn and Landscape, which I did until about 2015. And that's where about 2010, I really got into hardscapes. About 2011, I decided to stop doing all maintenance because it was just dragging me. I wasn't passionate about it. It was costing me money. I'd had a crew, a truck, a trailer, all to do, just enough work to keep them busy for about 4 days. And then I was trying to run a hardscape crew and a designer and trying to grow really fast. And 2011 was a big learning year for me. In 2012, I basically no more designer. I kept a foreman, and then no more mowing or maintenance. And we focused strictly on hardscapes. And I did like 10,000 more in revenue that year and actually made money. It was interesting how you focus and kind of take off from there. But so after that, the story continues. 2015, 14 to 15, I was getting really frustrated in my business. I was still struggling with running the business, I guess. I'm more of a hands-on in the business. I like to work the projects. I love doing the work. I love the detail. And I kind of try to catch up on the paperwork and all that stuff. That's how I was running my business. So it was a struggle financially. Towards the end, I was losing passion, but I was really passionate about the industry still. And I wanted to coach other people because I was seeing so much work. It was just subpar. Guys that were mowing were trying to do a wall or a patio. And these are the guys I was competing against. And I felt we were doing really nice projects that were, set us apart from other people. We had great relationships with our vendors and with manufacturing reps, and we were doing well. It was just frustrating. So I got to talking to one of my vendors and told him I wanted to start doing some coaching, and kind of like Frank Bjork and some of these guys do now. It's like that's kind of what I was thinking back in that 2015 time. And I knew that it was going to be tough to get people to pay for it. So I became a sales rep for the vendor. They hired me. So I closed my business in 2015, just about 5 years ago, I guess. Sorry, and went to work for a local nursery as a hardscape manager. And I managed 2 locations that they had for about a year and a half, and then helped them grow that, helped them kind of set up their facilities. And one thing I noticed was through my contracting career was that I always had good relationships. And this is something I would like to talk about because it's important to me and it's helped me along the way in my career. But I always treated my competitors really well. And I had competitors that didn't know me that, excuse me, that would talk about me and say, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing, so they could get the job. But I never approached a client that way. I would usually say, I'm not aware of what that company does. We sometimes be ending up coaching people on who to pick. I'm like, if we're doing this, why don't you just they trusted us, why don't you just hire us? We're a little bit higher, yes. But it was just that, I'd always tried to have good respect for my competitors and also the vendors and things like that. So when I went into working as a vendor and dealer, I had so many contractors follow me and say, we'd love to buy from you. They knew what I was talking about. And it was just a really good switch. And I was able to start teaching some classes and doing some kind of, PowerPoint presentations. I became an ICPI instructor in 2016. That was one of my goals. And I really enjoyed teaching that class. And in the late 2016, SiteOne purchased the company I was working for. So I became a hardscape sales rep for a larger area around Kansas City. And, within 3 hours or so, I was helping stores in other areas for other hardscapes, trying to get connections with other contractors in other areas outside of my territory. Plus, I had a handful of key customers that I would work with in this area. So I learned a ton. It was so good to go work for a business and learn about margins and markup and trying to make money and making good decisions as a sales rep, but also a manager of the category. And the SiteOne experience was really good for me. And I stayed on with them for about a year and a half and had an opportunity that I never thought that I would take. And that is to become the Mirage rep, Mirage is a porcelain tile manufacturer that sells through Belgard. And they had an opening for the Midwest. And I was very skeptical about tile in the early stages of the start of it, but I had this opportunity and I went and interviewed. It was a traveling job and I accepted it. It was crazy. And so I did that for 2.5 years and ended up covering the central US from Texas to North Dakota, Kansas, all the way to Ohio. And I met so many great contractors, industry leaders within Belgard and other manufacturers. I had the opportunity to see projects that just would blow you away with porcelain tile, pool projects, rooftops. I worked on some rooftop projects with some contractors, just amazing pedestals laying different ways. So as a contractor, I was able to do hands-on with how to install the tile, I was able to kind of assess issues people were facing, tell them the right tools that they needed, things like that. And it was just it was a fantastic opportunity. And I did that until July of this year. I was traveling 4 days a week, had 4 kids, married, and it was becoming a lot. So we, during the beginning of the pandemic, this has been a whole crazy thing for everybody. But in March, I was grounded. I had just come off a big show season from January to March. I was gone 4 to 5 days a week. And then all of a sudden I'm home for 3 months. And it was just getting kind of weird, and I was kind of getting the itch to get back in, and I've seen all these cool tools people were buying. Man, if I'd have had that 5 years ago, that product is really cool. I wish I could have installed that 5 years ago. And I had some opportunities that had come up also out of state where we'd maybe relocate that we considered taking. But I decided to get back into contracting, which is crazy. So here I am, 4 months in. I've already been busy. I'm booked until April. I mean, it's a crazy time to be in it. But I'm sorry that was very long, but it's a long story, and I think
Definitely.
I summarized it pretty good.
No, absolutely. And it provides great context. And I've got a lot of notes here that I got a lot of questions for you coming from that. So let's work our way backwards and start with, what was that draw to start your own business? Can we get a little bit deeper into that? Because I know you mentioned like seeing these projects and these tools and how much the industry has changed. Was that the main factor, that seeing how much this industry's changed and that being a draw, getting back into the business? Or were there other factors that made you a little bit more confident stepping into starting this business as you did?
That's a good question. Over the last year, I'd seen a lot of projects, and I was doing more hands-on training, and I was teaching. I taught ICPI like 3 or 4 times last winter, and I was just really getting, like, the juices were kind of flowing, I guess. And I was like, I'm teaching this class. I'm telling everybody, we go into job costing and estimating. I tell my story about how I was terrible at tracking numbers. I felt like I wanted another opportunity, and if I say this might be a little personal, but like with my last business, I got to the point in some cases financially where I was hiding things from my wife, because I didn't want her to worry. And as providers and protectors, as men, we don't want to let our spouse down or our significant other. And that was a strain on our marriage, for some time. And I had to build that trust back. And I think having a stable job with insurance, benefits, and all that stuff was something to help us ease into it. So when I was thinking about it took a few months to convince her, and I had to, we were very adamant about the financial part of it. And but I did want to I felt like I wanted to try some of these projects. I just finished a porcelain job, and I was like, I want to show people that it's possible, with cuts that you wouldn't normally see. We put inlights in porcelain. I mean, we drilled holes into porcelain, put inlights in it. We did some really cool stuff with it, and it's a small space, but I feel like I'm a seasoned veteran, but I'm proving myself all over again, and it's kind of exciting, I guess, if that makes sense. But I wanted to get back in, and with my expanded network of people, I feel like there's still opportunities for me to teach and travel and go do hands-on presentations or teaching classes. So I felt like it was a good opportunity to kind of get back into it. So hope that answered your question.
Absolutely. And then if I could ask this, both for myself, and I'm sure there's other people listening to this podcast that might be sales reps that used to be owning a hardscaping business, that also feel that kind of drawback to getting into it, or maybe they don't, I don't know. But what was that discussion like with your wife in terms of getting back into this? Because I'm sure that's not an easy discussion to have, for one, and two, I mean, you two are on the same team, so obviously this is something that you two decided together that you would get into.
Yeah, she has to be all in. I mean, that's how I feel anymore, because it just makes it easier. And I think she was nervous, but at the same time, I was I was telling her that, she was like, why don't we start in February? Why do you start in the middle of the year? Let's get through winter, because she knows the winter struggles we would have. And I was like, well, it's crazy how busy, like Josh Sutton is a friend of mine, and I was bouncing stuff off him way before anybody else knew. And he's like, man, it's crazy. I can't keep up with everything. And I was like, well, I feel like I should get it now and book the winter. I feel like I can actually get us set up to start spring because of how busy it is right now. Just people are staying home and spending money on their houses. It's very similar to 2008 and 9 when I started, and I was doing a lot of remodels. There was no new construction. We were just going in and fixing up, people were investing in their homes. I felt like it was a very similar opportunity, but I had grown over the last 5 years, like in my mind, I'd grown so much from business, watching, learning. I was picking people's brains all over the country, not because I knew I was getting back into business, but just because I knew that I had come short, and I was seeing companies that were very successful. They were building $1 million buildings. I don't know if that's all a show or not, but they needed it. I mean, it was like they were growing so fast. They needed these facilities, and they needed the equipment and the trucks. And like, how do these guys do this? So I was able to talk to some of these people and really get a feel for what I was doing wrong, but also offer some of the things that I did that were right, maybe installation wise. So it was a definitely a joint decision, and I feel like we're on a good page just because of the way I set things up financially to begin with. So that was a game changer for me. So it's just working better. So this time around.
Definitely. And then what was your decision? Like, you're starting this business. What were the first things that you bought for the business? Because did you keep any of the equipment that you had from before? Are you starting completely from scratch? And what were those first things, those tools that you had your eyes on that kind of drew you back into the industry? What did you get right away?
So what I had was a half-ton truck and a bunch of shovels and a wheelbarrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, so I knew. So what I was like, one of my goals was to get equipment because I'm working solely. I would say 2 to 3 days a week I'm working by myself, and then I have a firefighter that worked with me before, and that was really cool. I called him and I said, hey, I'm getting back in. You want to join? He thought about it a couple of days, talked to his wife. He's like, dude, I'm in. So the days he's not working at the fire station, he is helping me. And that's been huge because he already knows my system. Like it's just like we never quit. So that's been a lot of fun. But I knew we needed equipment because we were both 5 years older. I'm 41 years old, so my back and all these things are that weren't hurting for 5 years are now hurting again. But so equipment was important. So I took out a small loan, just a personal loan. I hadn't really prepared myself to start a business, so. So the first things I bought was a zip level, a roller compactor, a reversible plate compactor, an IQ 362, a Stihl 420, and then I bought a few like hand tools that I didn't have. I had a bunch of hand tools left, so I had that stuff, and that's kind of how and a dump trailer. I bought a dump trailer. I knew those were the things I needed, and I had a half-ton truck, and we made that work. And so that was the initial purchases that I made. And then about a month in, the contractor here in Kansas City asked me to help him out on a patio, and he had a Ditch Witch 1550, and he left it there on the job for us, and that was a big mistake. So I tried that out, and I said, I got to have one of these because I was looking at a mini skid steer, and we were renting, like the Toro TX1000, the Dingo. So I was like, man, I need something that I can move stuff with when I'm by myself. Skid steers are too big. So I was able to, and this is, well, I'm sure we'll get into some financials, but like I have borrowed money. Nobody likes debt, but I really felt like it was the decision was either 3 employees and turnover and a bunch of headaches, or I could just buy a machine that I pay a monthly payment on. So that's the route I went. And about 2 months in, I got a Ditch Witch 1550, and that has been a lifesaver for me. And then because of that, it kind of changed the way I was thinking. And I'd seen some guys that were doing enclosed trailers, things like that. So I sold my dump trailer, and I went and traded my half-ton truck on a 1-ton dump, and then I bought a 20-foot enclosed trailer, and I have it all set up. It was built, heavy duty. The ditch witch fits in it. I got all my tools in it. And that's been really good for efficiency for me with only having one vehicle, because I can leave that trailer on the job site. I can haul this ditch witch if I need to. We can dump stuff in the truck. So it's been very good for efficiency, and my goal was to buy equipment, and my philosophy on that is, like, I would rather be able to tell a bank I can't pay them than to tell an employee or his family that I don't have the money to pay their paycheck. So I knew I was going to be starting Slim and starting a lot of my own and having a part-time helper. So the equipment was important to me. So I feel like we've made decisions that are smart and decisions that we can afford as we're moving forward. So that's a lot of equipment starting out, and most people don't probably jump in, but I'd also had the confidence of knowing that I know how to do the work, and I know how to get the sales, and I know how to produce. So I wasn't worried that I wouldn't be able to take care of it, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Absolutely. And coming from being a porcelain sales rep, have you adapted porcelain into your current business? Have you tried to sell porcelain? Have you installed porcelain?
Honestly, I came out of that job, and the first thing I show people, if it makes sense, is porcelain. I think it's one of the best products you can install on a patio. And I know I'll get a lot of people that are disagree with me, but we did just install one. I was able to sell one. It's a 2-level patio. We did a wood grain on one level, and then like a 2x2 on another. Like I said, we put some inlights in. So we drilled it, we cut it. We installed it on open graded base, so it's actually on 3/4 inch base with a 3/8 chip, and we put polymeric sand in the joints. And it looks great. It performs great, and we're looking forward to seeing how it performs over time. And then I have a job coming up where I'm specing. We're going to read. Paper King's going to love this. We're going to do a deck and a patio. So, but we're presenting that here, and we're going to try to do porcelain on the deck. They have a really nice wood grain look. So it's like a reclaimed look. So we'll do that, because the composite decking, it's going to be real easy to sell, because the composite decking they have looks terrible. So we may look into some other composite. But my construction background we also, on this past job, we did a roof and covered patio. So I do constructions and framing as well. So it's something we can offer as a whole.
Channel your porcelain sales rep here and tell us why is porcelain a superior product? Why does it cost as much as it does?
That's a great question. Sometimes it's because if I'm the guy that's out of the, I'm the former guy that's now a contractor. I mean, I have to fight it now,
Yeah.
The wood planks in my area sell for $14 or $15 a square foot. But I look at other pavers in my area that are, like a wet cast or something like that, that's selling at 10 or 12. The difference is that porcelain is something that's never going to change. You can run a knife or a screwdriver over it, you won't scratch it. It's stain resistant. You can pour a glass of wine and wipe it off with a paper towel. It's 2x2, weighs 38 pounds. We laid 550 square feet in 2.5 days, and it was all cut in. I mean, I don't know if that seems good or not, but porcelain it's not as hard to work with if you have the right tools. And that's why I always tell people, we were able to cut it with the IQ saw using a porcelain blade. It is harder, but that's one of the benefits. It's lighter, it's more durable. The tolerances are perfect. I mean, the lines you get out of it, you'll never get out of the paper. I mean, if you're setting it up right and using spacers, it is the most precise product you can lay. So that helps, and you're laying 4 square feet at a time, and all the things I used to say. But I kind of went into this last project wanting to prove what I was talking about for the last 2.5 years. So I did. So I was like, I'm going to drill it. I'm going to cut it all kinds of different directions. We're going to show people that it can be done. And I still have a really good relationship with the company I work for. And I send them pictures, and I'm working on a little tutorial on our installation to put up, for people to watch on open graded base. So that'll be fun. But to me, it's a superior product. And then it goes to the next paver. I mean, it's a lifetime product. That's
A recurring thing that I've heard you say is about education. And,
yes.
you went to college, you wanted to become an ICPI instructor. Why is education so important to you in this industry and wanting to both be a student of the industry, but also spread that knowledge on to others?
I just believe I've come across so many people that you just can't change their mind.
Hmm.
There's guys in the industry that are just stuck in their ways, and they do what they do. They're not going to sway from it, and some of that has to do with it's because it works for their business. It's because they know they can make money doing it. I like new things, and I like to learn. I've never stopped learning in this industry, and it's made me more passionate about it, and that's in turn made me want to tell more people about the things I've learned, and also say that, instead of saying this is kind of how as a rep and now being back as an installer, I've always tried to push the vendors and the manufacturers to be better instead of just saying your product is terrible. I would say, I have an opportunity to buy something over here that's better and it's similarly priced. What are you guys working on in the future? Because I have my relationship with you. I don't just jump around and install whatever, but I'm also an industry guy that would teaches more about the installation than the type of paver, or whether it's porcelain or dry cast or wet cast. It doesn't matter. You have to do the installation proper, and then the products will last longer, or the installation will last longer. It's usually not the product that fails; it's the installation. So you just see compaction failure, you see edge exchange failure, and I'm trying new things even now as a new installer. We're doing a project on the Technosteel Easy Base right now. I'm doing open graded base. I'm an ICPI instructor, and I always have the question in my classes, what about open graded base, because it's so popular now?
Yeah.
Or what about Gator base or Easy base, or why aren't these in the book? And I'm trying these products to see how they perform so I can talk better about them, when I'm teaching the class. So I don't think they're not, they're less of a product or less of a method. I actually prefer the open graded base. But the geosynthetic base is something new for me that I'm just trying. But so far we haven't quite got to laying it yet, but it's doing well.
Your experience with ICPI and being an instructor, I'm sure you've run across other instructors and talked with them. What are their I guess thoughts on that synthetic base and open graded base? Because I know that ICPI hasn't quite caught up with those and stood behind them. But what about other instructors that you've come across?
We talk about it a little bit.
Mhm.
I've taught a class with one guy only once, and the rest I've done by myself. So
Gotcha.
I have discussed some of that with them, and some of them like it. But we always, and when we're teaching the class, we basically say, for the sake of this class, we're going to talk about what's in the book. And I actually did one in Colorado last year. We sat around for an hour afterwards, after the test was done, and we talked about other methods, because I just like to talk about other methods. And they were having some severe failures because Denver has some of the worst freezing. I didn't realize this. Some of the worst freeze and thaw cycles around, because they have a lot of snow that melts and freezes, melts, freezes. It's not just the ground. It could be 65 and then it could be 10, and you get 2 feet of snow. So I actually visited a couple of job sites after the class where they were having some really bad heaving. So we talked about maybe open graded is the option, but make sure you're getting that water. You still have to get that water drained out. As far as like the Gator base or Easy base, I've talked to ICPI about it. Both of them. I've talked about both. I think that the geosynthetic base will never be an ICPI because it doesn't create interlock. And that's the whole premise of the class, is it's an interlocking pavement. We talked about sizes, we talked about slabs versus, most things have gone to slabs. But if you're actually doing a true paver, a driveway installation or a patio installation, you're compacting into the bedding sand to get interlock. That's where the interlock comes, not in your joint sand and all that. It all works together to create interlock. So some of the things with the open graded is joint sand loss, which if you're using swept in concrete sand, yes, you might have some joint loss. You might use a little bit more polymeric sand in an open graded base, but you're not going to really lose it. So it's basically a hybrid permeable application. But they talk about permeable is interlocked with the right type of pavers and system. So I think people are, if they're like me, hopefully they're wanting to learn other ways and learn ways to be more efficient and ways that are going to work better in certain climates. I still believe that ICPI's method is great. I mean, if you do it correctly, if you compact and you have proper drainage and proper edge restraints and all that, it's to me, I'm not afraid to do it. I may do that on the next patio just because I want to.
Yeah, and I'm always preaching, choosing the right method for the application, because, one method might not be the most suitable for that application. It all depends on what you are trying to install.
Right. And we do a lot of raised patios in our area because the way that our yards are graded, we always have to build up. So that you want to do that with an open graded bait, open,
Exactly.
like a 3/4 inch clean. So at that point, you might as well, just use one product, in my opinion. And then you can get really good drainage out of your bedding and all that. So there are some areas where it does lend itself to be a better option for base material.
You mentioned about relationships and the importance of relationships through your career, and especially from changing from different situations, different jobs, and here and there. Why build a relationship? I mean, when I stopped working for a supplier, I immediately tried to connect with as many contractors that I knew, and tell them what I was doing. And I had mixed reactions. Some, hung up their phone, and some were really willing to, build that connection with me, because then we could mutually benefit from each other with leads that don't fit my business model. I could send to them and vice versa. But for you, what did building those relationships mean?
Well, I honestly, it's gotten me to every point in my business or in my career, I guess I should say, because from from contractor to dealer and then having contractors buy from me and then us bounce ideas off each other and me tell my story to them and help them with some of the struggles on their installation or helping new guys learn how to do it, coaching people on focusing. My thing is, if you're not going to focus on, if you want to do everything in the industry, like maintenance and installation, you need to have different divisions. It's too hard to focus and be good at all of it. And as I went to the dealer and then the manufacturer, I just kept seeing it's also a very small world. Like the hardscape industry is so small, even though it's a big community. I would run into people that I had met, and so it was just like I just kept these relationships and kept being respectful and kept, having conversations. And I kept my relationship with my Belgard rep that was here in Kansas City because I was then selling him Mirage, So I was basically a vendor of Belgard. So the relationship that I've had with them has been 10 plus years. And then as I get back into contracting, I've kept the contractor friendships going, and, we still go to lunch, and I'm still in the industry. They kind of see what I'm doing. We hang out at H&A together. And then I tell people I'm getting back in, and guess who I'm getting all my referrals from right now? Contractors.
Right.
They're too busy, and they know that I do really good work. Every job that I've sold, I've gotten from a contractor so far. And one was a customer of mine that decided, when I was at the dealer, that had decided to get out of hardscape and focus on maintenance. And he had some hardscape tools that I bought used from him. And he's like, we need somebody to refer to. Everybody's so busy. He's like, I'm sending everybody to you. And I've sold him some really nice projects off that relationship. And the one I just finished was referred by another contractor that didn't want to go to the area, or they were too busy. We just got done. Me and another contractor here, he called me to see if I wanted to build a deck and a roof on a job. It happened to be the one I'd already did. So he's like, oh, why don't you just, it's just been amazing. I think that's where that respect is important, because even in a small town like Kansas City, I have relationships that have grown to the point where they're trusting me, because I'm not going to go badmouth them or talk bad about them or say, well, they couldn't have done this anyway or whatever. I'm going to represent them as well. Like they referred me. It's just like one of your customers referring you. You want to do that right. So because you never know when they might have another referral. You might need them to do something. So it's actually blown me away because I was a little bit worried about how to get the projects, and all of them have come from local contractors that I would consider competitors.
So when you did take that leap this last time to start your business, before you took the leap, did you try to line up some work, or was this just, you know what, we hit a switch and you went for it and then you started to get the leads?
Well, I was trying to be very careful because I was still working.
Right. Right.
And I was more of, like July, I was doing a lot more like business planning.
Yeah.
And I had a feeling I wouldn't, have any trouble getting work. And I'd already had a couple of guys say, hey, if you need money or you need to work or something, just come work on our crew, or we'll give you a sub job or whatever. Like those were the kind of, conversations we were having, which was like, I was already seeing the support. The Belgard reps that are here, we're friends. So, they had stuff coming in. They put me right back on the Belgard authorized contractor list. One of the things I wanted to do this time was fiberglass pools, which we haven't even discussed this. And so I worked diligently, and it was a lot of phone calls and a lot of getting hung up on, and a lot of no return phone calls. But I was able to get signed on as a dealer with a fiberglass pool company. And so that opened a lot of opportunities for bids, because I've done more pool quotes than I have hardscape quotes. And that's led to me, doing full designs with plants and hardscape and pool. And we're still working on getting a few of those, but we do have one of those. We're doing a pool install coming up in February.
Nice.
But that's where it was just like, so I had my mind going a lot of different directions, and I just felt like the work was going to come. And the first job we did was my insurance agent. So I called him. He did my last business. He does my house and cars. I said, hey, I'm going to need liability again, and my equipment covered and all that. And he's like, hey, I need some landscaping done. So that was a pretty good, $10,000 job we started with, and that worked out really well. And then I was doing the bids, and it was starting to flow. So yeah, we're pretty much booked until April at this point. So it's been crazy.
That's awesome. And and you mentioned early on that you learned that you were not an employee, that you were an entrepreneur. What was it that made you realize that? What makes you think that way?
Well, I don't think it's out of lack of respect. I think that can be taken the wrong way too, because my dad was one of the hardest workers I have ever been around. We didn't have a ton of money, but he put in hours, and he would come home and play football with us. He was like the dad, that came home dirty. He worked in a factory type setting. He was the example for me. So I think what was hard was like working for people and them asking me to take on responsibility and help lead their company in certain situations, and then not letting me do it. Like I felt like I had good ideas and good direction, and I had that entrepreneurial, I can help you with this, and so that was difficult, and just kind of butting heads with people that were, butting heads is the right word, but just kind of like never really on the same page with somebody that's running their business, and then asking me to help them run their business, but they didn't like my ideas. Maybe they were terrible ideas. That could have been it too, but it was just hard for me to like get under somebody. I think that's why the sales jobs were really good for me, because I did my job, I produced, and they left me alone, because I was producing. And that's kind of where the sales, they want that entrepreneurial self-starter, right? But in businesses or small businesses, I felt like I wasn't valued, like I should be making more money for what I offered. And that probably kept me from learning, because I'd kind of gotten, maybe an attitude or something. But there were some opportunities I had that just, it just didn't work out. And I wish I would have maybe valued those a little bit more, but I just was never able to kind of land at one spot and kind of go. I was always wanting more, and I own my own businesses too. So it's like, oh, I know I could be making, they're paying me this and they're making, it was just the way I was looking at it. And, that was 15 years ago. I've grown up so much since then. It's crazy.
Now, getting into your business, and when a lead comes in, where do you take it from there when somebody contacts you, whether it's texting, phone call, whatever it might be? How do you get them to that first consultation? What questions do you ask them? Talk us through that.
Well, if it's a referral, then I pretty much just set up a time to meet. Or if they're comfortable doing that, I know things have changed a lot, recently. But if somebody, whether it's a contractor or a friend or a previous customer, if they refer me to somebody, I just set up an appointment. I typically, at first, I was just trying, how it is when you're starting. You're like, oh yeah, I'll get in front of everybody. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't really saying, hey, what's your budget? Or if I did, they'd be like, we don't know yet. You get that same answer. So I was doing so many bids and not closing anything. And I'm trying to get back into the game. I'm trying to figure out what people are charging. I actually bought your spreadsheet, and I was like, well, this will help me. And it's actually been a really good help. I'm just trying to put all the numbers back in to make sure I'm, doing the costing and stuff right.
Awesome.
And the times, but that's been a real big help for, the overhead, the things you just trying to figure out right off the bat. Mm-hmm. And so what I was doing was a lot of bids and not getting a lot of, sales. We were getting enough sales. So I started doing something different, and I tried to bait them on the budget. And the way I was doing that was, they were like, well, we don't really know. And I said, well, if you need a design, we're going to have to design something that fits your budget. So we're not, wasting your time or ours. So I can design something. We can design something that's 5,000, or we can design something that's 200 plus thousand. And then immediately you get that, oh, well, I was thinking like 30 or 50 or,
right.
It's like, so you did have a budget.
Yeah.
So then I can say, or if it's 5, then I'm like, well, that's really not going to work. But if it's 50, then I'm like, well, let's come check it out. I'm sure we can, work something that sounds like you've done enough research that this is going to be an investment. So that's kind of where that goes. And usually that number is the starting point. We had a pool bid that we turned into a patio, because they didn't realize pools were so much. But we turned it into a nice patio project. So I try not to leave just saying, sorry, we can't do your pool or we can't do your patio, but we look at other things that we can do, or maybe phase the project as we go. So that's kind of, I was spending a lot of time running around. So now that I've gotten busier in the field, I've tried to value my time more, and I have done less estimates, but I've gotten better estimates, I guess.
Definitely. And that first consultation, do you charge for it?
No, not at this time. We do it for free. I mean, I'm trying to get in front of people right now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I can see that being a thing I do in the future. Mm-hmm. And I've listened to a couple of your podcasts and heard guys, there are different methods of approaching that. I'm also not a designer, so we should probably get that out of the way. I'm an installer. I love the craft. I love the details and all, doing the work. So I work with a designer, and then I have some other things that we do. But so I have to charge for design because I'm paying a designer.
Right.
So what I typically do is, if it's just a patio and it's fairly easy and they're not wanting I'm not a big fan of doing plants and things, but I'll do it to complete the project. I like the construction stuff more. So as a Belgard authorized contractor, they provide their Belgard Design Studio for free for those contractors. So you can send a sketch on a piece of paper or a napkin, and they'll send you back a 3D rendering on Google SketchUp. Basically, it has their products and all that. So I've been able to sketch out something and show somebody a 3D drawing of what their backyard's going to look like, and not charge them for it. And the way I do that is I say, as a partner with Belgard, this is something they offer me, and I'm just going to pass it on to you. And at some point I can say, we can do a 3D drawing that's going to be $300, or we can have our designer come and do a full scale design for $800 to $1,500. And we've had a designer that we work with. She's contract. She does not work for me. And she's done about 3 or 4 for me so far. And it just elevates the jobs completely to another level. And I usually bring her in on the full projects. And those people are willing to spend, that money on a larger project.
And then when it comes to payment plans, does this vary from job to job for you? Do you try to get a certain amount up front? How do you structure your payment plans?
For years, I've done 50-50. And I'll say this a bunch of times while we're on here. I've enjoyed listening to this podcast because it's given me so many great ideas. Because I didn't realize that I would be in a position where, I would be selling 60 and 80 and $100,000 jobs in the first 6 months. So, but the pool thing has elevated that, but also just the quality of projects we're getting. So I've kind of been changing it per job, honestly. Pool is a fiberglass pool. We have to order it. So I get 25% down and then 25% when it ships. So basically they've given me 50% before it even gets to their house. So I've paid for the equipment and all that. So, and then we do different stages because that's a pretty quick process, but I still just want them investing in it. So kind of when the pool's set and then completion, we kind of do that kind of thing. So it's kind of a 25% draw as we go.
Gotcha.
Kind of in different stages. Most of the time I still do just 50-50 on probably anything 30,000 or less. And then one project I did was actually a renovation loan. I had to be approved by the financing company, and we got our general contracting license for the pool thing anyway, but that was a part of it for the city. So that's been a big help for us too, be able to pull permits and do all that stuff. But they paid me on draws. Like I got $6,000 to start a almost $50,000 job, so that was tough. So we did draw periods on that one. But I'm kind of trying to be flexible, but I'd say anything over 30 and between 30 and 80 to 100, I'd probably do thirds, I guess. Thirds or maybe fourths, something like that. So just to kind of keep the cash flow rolling, because on a job that size, working, just 2 of us and one of us I'm by myself some, that takes a while to get done. So we just want to make sure we're paying our bills as we go.
Absolutely. And I know you've just started this business. Maybe you can draw on your experiences in the industry for this next question. But do you have any horror stories or things that have gone wrong, whether it's on the job site, dealing with the customer, dealing with payments, anything that you'd want to share in terms of that?
I think some of my own horror stories were my own fault. Sometimes where I just, I was living off deposits and things like that you get into. And I did have one customer years ago that we were almost at completion. And we had sodded, we had planted, we did a patio. It was a nice project, probably 2010. And this was a really tough year for me. This is when I was transitioning out of maintenance and trying to manage, more employees and cash was, it was tough. It was kind of those growing pains kind of, thing. And he said, we did everything, mulched, came back the next day to kind of do some cleanup. And he said, we decided we didn't like any of these plants you put in, even though they were on the design, they signed off of them. They said they looked good when we left the day before. And he's like, I ordered all new plants and they'll be here at the end of the week. And I was like, well, I was already kind of tired of this guy.
Yeah.
There were some red flags. He was kind of one of those guys just waved his money around like you'll do whatever I say because I can pay it. And so that was a struggle. And I said, you know what, I'm not going to do a warranty. We're going to charge you to plane them. I can't do this, free of charge. He's like, I don't care. It just got into this. He just kind of got defensive. And so I said, you know what, I'm just going to leave. I feel like we're done. You owe me some money, but at this point, it's going to cost me less if I just leave. So I left the job, left, $5,000 or $6,000 on the table, which is a huge amount of money for me, especially finishing a job. That's kind of what gets you to the next step or whatever in some cases. So that was probably the worst. And that's the worst one I will talk about. There was others that they just drug on too long, and that comes down to just facilitating. We were working with a general contractor, just facilitating others and other people working. And I didn't do a rock clause on the job. and we dug 6 inches and we hit rock. There's just so many variables and things I've learned along the way where, anytime you're excavating, you never know what you're going to hit below the, and then just timing and documenting your time, all that stuff that I've learned is hopefully going to help me be more successful in this round, because it's something I feel like I'm going to do for a while.
Greg, I know we talked a bit about installation, and tools already, but anything that you have already decided that you live by in your business, in your company, in your installs, that you really couldn't do your business without, or at least not as efficiently, that you would recommend, let's say somebody just starting out to definitely invest in?
I don't know that you can, you can do the job by renting a lot of things, so you don't necessarily have to invest in it. But if you want to, what it came down to me was I was spending so much money renting that it made more sense to buy, and that was the mini skid, for sure. And I've had those before, and I've had skid steers before. Like, that was what was different about this time, is knowing what I've had and what works, and being able to find that machine that was kind of both was a big deal. I'd say a mini skid steer is something that's something that people should look into. I know there's, discussions about the skid steer's better, but like some of you guys say, do what you can afford. I would say that for sure. Rent as long as you can, but if it's starting to not make sense to rent, if you're going to buy a machine over a year by renting it, that's kind of hard. It's hard to process that. I'd say that the dustless saw. I've cut concrete for so many years that I can't imagine what's laying in my lungs, that's going to be there forever. So any kind of dust collection equipment, I think, is important. I think IQ's done a really good job with that. They're newer, they're getting better. I like that with companies. They're getting better. They're coming out with new stuff. Maybe the first one was a little rough, but this, the newer stuff they're really starting to make their mark in the industry. And a roller compactor, if you're going to do slabs, if you don't want to tear out, broken pavers, if you want to, consolidate your joint sand properly, that roller compactor was one of the first things I went and got, and a reversible, a decent size. There's a lot of things you need. It's just decide what you can afford and what makes the most sense for your company, where you are now, or where you're going towards, and try, rent, or if you can get into a contractor and say, hey, can I borrow that? Or can you show me how it works? If you have good contractors in your area, you should be able to start that network. We have a great network here in Kansas City. So that's been nice, but we borrow each other's tools. I know that doesn't happen everywhere, but it's been a big help to help you decide what you need and what works best.
Anybody that we've actually talked about quite a bit here on this episode, but in people in general, but anybody that you want to give a shout out here on the podcast in terms of helping you along the way, anybody that you look to on Instagram or anything for inspiration, any shout outs that you want to give right now?
So I don't know if these guys listen, but I'll tell you that there's some guys that are way back, that's like way back in the industry, and guys that have been there that gone from contracting to sales and back to contracting. And this is the guy I called. But Mark Larson out in Utah, he's out in the Salt Lake area. He does some really killer hardscape jobs. He's an ICPI instructor, and that's how I met him. And he's gone back and forth, and I call him every once in a while. He's a great dude. Mountain West Specialty Pavers, I believe. So they do some really great work. They were a good porcelain customer for us, and he's always trying new things, and he does really great work. I would say, maybe people that don't know is, some of the old hardscape legends. But the new guys, I've kind of enjoyed getting on Instagram lately and following some of these guys like Andy Mulder and Caleb and Sean at Premier, RC. But like Josh Sutton's a buddy of mine. We met in the weirdest way about 6 or 7 years ago. Maybe, I guess longer than that. But our wives were both in dental hygiene, and we sat down at a dentist, like fundraiser dental dinner. So out of place, and we sat at the same table, and our wives kind of knew each other a little bit. And we're like, what do you do? They're like, landscaping. Oh, that's what I do, And we just hit it off. And at that point, we were both installing, and he was just kind of getting started in the area. and I was kind of burned out at that point, and that's been a really great relationship. And so he's a great guy, and he's very knowledgeable. Him and his brother they do really good work. I have a lot of respect for them. They were on my top referral list when I was, people would call me for years after I quit and say, who do I call? And like, well, you're gonna have to wait a while, but I'd call Josh, or I'd give, a couple other names, but he's definitely a good friend of mine. And then there's some guys at Belgard, like Joe Reboyne. He had the Harmony Outdoor. He's kind of a high level hardscape guy with Belgard now. He's a very knowledgeable guy. Came from the same kind of contractor world. The rep here, Craig Folkers, he's a friend of mine. Like I buy from Belgard because of my relationship with them, and then we're doing a unilock patio right now, but that's what the customer picked, so I'll feed my family. But they're great. Everybody has great pavers, but it's like I really stick to those relationships because those people have helped me not just this time but last time, and through every step of my process, and so I've met so many people all over the country with the jobs that I've had. It's hard to like name a few. There's just been really good key people in helping me grow in the industry. So,
Greg, I really appreciate you being so open, and it really helps, get this information into other people's ears to hear another perspective from you, and for us to kind of soak it in and apply it to our careers, our businesses, our lives. So I do really appreciate your openness throughout this whole interview. And I do have one last question for you. And that is, if there's one thing that you know now that you wish you knew from the very beginning, what would that one thing be?
This is an easy question. And I told how I'd set up my finances, and that I would say profit first. I kind of stumbled into that book in July, and I bought it on audio, and I listened to it twice. And then I got Profit First for Contractors, and I listened to that, and I was just mesmerized by the idea. And because in my previous company, I was the guy selling to pay my bills. I wasn't completing jobs. I was like, I need that deposit. I need that deposit. I need to get it. I got payroll. I got to go sell something. And I would find myself in certain times, sometimes it was really good. And this wasn't a big a deal, but as your overhead grows, if you're not changing the way you're running your business with it, you're just kind of doing the same thing and throwing square foot prices on stuff. You're just trying to survive. I listened to this book right before I started. So before I had my first check, I had 5 bank accounts. So it's totally changed the way that I view my finances. And it's allowed me to have tax money set aside, profit money set aside, and operating money. And I've paid myself twice a month since I started, which was a big thing to my wife. And I've run lean, and I've run on one part-time employee, because I know at this point, I need to be the one making the money so I can support my family. And it's helped me to set that money aside. And I'm even on payroll, direct deposited. I mean, I'm set up to where I transfer money out of that account to pay myself every, a couple times a month. And that's been a huge thing. And the Profit First has also helped that trust, that I talked about earlier, where we can get on the bank and we can see where we stand every day. And we know where we have to make those adjustments, or we know what we can go do or can't do. And so I know that's been mentioned on the show podcast a couple of times. So I am so thankful that I stumbled into that, because that's been a total game changer for me. And it's given me trust in myself financially, I guess, as well.
Definitely an amazing book to go have a read. Profit First by Shawn Van Dyke there. And Craig, I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate you being so open on this podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Let our audience know where they can find you online, anything that you want to leave them with.
You can find me at Scheller Outdoor Living on Facebook, Instagram, and I'm trying to get into YouTube a little bit, but I haven't done much on there. But I'm trying to share some, time lapses and a couple of maybe a little short how-to videos and stuff on some certain stuff. But I'm not a vlogger. I don't stand in front of my phone or camera all day. I'm not really set up that way, so it's kind of tough for me. But I'm more of a just, here it is, this is how I did it, So it's probably not going to be very entertaining, but I think there's some processes that I'd like to share and just some, just some things I want to do on YouTube. But I'm trying to be active on Instagram and do some stuff and show what we're doing. And then I'll plug my music. I also sing country music. So Craig Scheller Music on Instagram on that as well. So I figure I might as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Craig Scheller Music. I'm going to definitely go follow that right now as well. And thank you so much, Craig.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, sir.